Thank you, Your Honor, for allowing me this opportunity to speak on behalf of my family and myself, and to have my statement addressing the CCRC recommendation that is before the court today entered into the record. First, I would like to quickly introduce myself. About 6 years ago, I pursued my graduate studies in the areas of leadership and organizational development at Fresno Pacific University, which is a privately held Mennonite school, and it leads the nation in academic research and study of conflict resolution and peace building. One could say it is an institution of non-traditional education in comparison to Fresno State, for example. I run my own consulting agency, which offers digital marketing and support services along with consulting for business development. However, because of my passion for the empathetic healing of emotional wounds, I also have a practice as a certified master life coach and personality assessment evaluator, specializing in narcissistic abuse recovery. And I'm currently pursuing an accredited certification as a clinical hypnotherapist. If it is the will of this court to protect the rights of and ensure the health and well-being of the children in this case, as I believe is the mandate in the state of California, then the CCRC recommendation that is the subject of today's hearing must be disregarded in favor of further mediation. This recommendation not only puts my children at 3 times more risk of harm than is necessary each month, but further ensures an increase in their emotional stress and is entirely predicated upon information presented here as fact that is not true, which is to say that my kids, Wolfgang and Inga, are students enrolled in the publicly administered institution of traditional education, as it is classified in the recommendation, when that is simply not true. My kids, my amazing boy with special needs, and my analytical young girl are receiving the best education of their lives at Stone Castle Academy, which is our private homeschool, because they are each guaranteed one-on-one time with their teacher, and they each have their own curriculum, which is individually tailored to them specifically. I registered the school with the state of California in December of 2020 in response to the breakdown of traditional education due to the ongoing global pandemic, and they have been happily enrolled students at Stone Castle Academy, our private homeschool, since January of 2021. You see, we're not exactly on the same schedule as the public school, since we don't share that philosophy. Our philosophy is that you can never really take a vacation from learning because we value lifetime learning. You would need a vacation, though, if you thought that learning meant waking up at 6:30 a.m. 5 days a week and sitting quietly in a row in rooms of 30 to 40 other equally miserable children while you were tasked with not speaking unless a grown-up asked you to repeat back to them what they just told you. But we're not running an institution, so learning has a different meaning at Stone Castle Academy. While we have designated classroom times and regular assignments, we're always talking about what we're learning together as we go about our daily business, working in the garden or around the house, when they are with me at my family's home on Stone Castle Highway in Sebastopol. Teaching them inspires my own learning, and we're excited about starting the next level in this environment. Inga is always planning her next experiment or life hack reality test, and Wolfgang is working his way through a YouTube Creator Academy course, which is teaching him how to have a successful gaming channel on YouTube. Believe it or not, it's a lot of hard work, but it builds him up where he's naturally strong because it is something he's drawn to. Also, it's a way that he can start generating income on his own as he levels up his broadcast skills. You don't have to graduate college and apply for a good job to make a decent living these days. There's a lot of money at YouTube. The truth is that Wolfgang had become quite withdrawn as a result of his experience with the public school. After the global pandemic fear and the breakdown of traditional education, and he's only just begun to relax a little as we redefine what learning means to him. This is all oddly not reflected in the recommendation, which is the subject of today's hearing. According to what's on that piece of paper, my children are supposed to be living a life where they are bouncing back and forth on about 4 hours of bad road between their parents on the weekend. And they don't have this amazing experience of learning at a private academy, but instead get shuffled around and bused to separate institutions of traditional education where they have to sit quietly in neat rows and get permission to use the toilet. And when they get back to their emotionally abusive mother's boyfriend's house at the end of the day, they've got to make sure they get their homework done, because if mom hears from their teacher that they're falling behind, she's going to start punishing them again. We can add to that this ominous evaluator with some institutional yardstick called IEP, and it sounds pretty bleak for these kids. I petitioned the court to reevaluate the visitation orders that were put in place 3 years ago in light of the fact that there is an ongoing pandemic, and in light of the fact that I am now their teacher and they are no longer enrolled in public school, to grant that we may now have alternating 15-day visits, spending half of their time learning in person with me and half of the time learning over the internet while they are with their mother. It requires only 1 trip a month and offers the children more stability. It's what they want, and there's no stress or emotional pain in it for them. If it is in actual fact their health and happiness that you wish to preserve, then you must disregard the recommendation that is before the court today in favor of further mediation. A quick glance at the rationale prepared by Catherine J. Wakefield, LCSW, in 2018, which informs the recommendation that is the basis for the visitation orders in question, in comparison to the standards of the minimum criteria for child welfare, is enough to inform the court which party is more suited to be the children's steward of health and happiness. One criterion is whether the child has special needs that one parent can meet better than the other. My son was born in 2009 with autism spectrum disorder, and although I didn't really know what that meant, Wolfgang has taught me what it means for him. Item number 15 in the rationale from 2018 says, Mother states that she had postpartum with Wolfgang and he used to be close friends with his father and father did everything and was really there. Mother is openly admitting here that the child was almost exclusively cared for by me until, that is, she took him from me without warning and made it impossible for us to have a relationship. This further establishes that I, as his father who did everything and was really there, have a deep, unique, intuitive, and emotional bond with my son, which no one else on earth may claim, not even his mother. I can only imagine how emotionally traumatic and scarring his mother's actions were for him at the time that she deceptively removed the children from my care. Her short statement also reveals the absence of his mother's empathy in relation to his overwhelming confusion and sadness, and provides an explanation for her ongoing vengeful motivation to persecute the children and I with her juggernaut agenda of parental alienation. Yet the recommendation, which is the subject of today's hearing, denies me visitation during the week and still has the children spending the majority of their time with their mother. Another criterion for determining what would be in the children's best interest is the ability of each parent to meet the educational and social needs of the child. Well, given the fact that it was I who established and administer Stone Castle Academy, our private homeschool, and not their mother, the answer here should be self-evident. Yet the recommendation before the court today refuses to acknowledge this fact, and instead puts mom in charge of returning them to the institution. Just another reason to disregard the current recommendation in favor of further mediation. Another criterion commonly used to determine what is in a child's best interest is the employment status of each parent, including the schedule and number of hours worked. As I mentioned in my introduction, I run my own consulting company, and so that means that I necessarily have to put in a lot of hours, and it means that I don't have a regular 9-to-5 schedule with a boss and a time card. So it's not unusual for me to be at work during all hours of the day or night. Yet I rarely have any need to leave the comfort of my home, because my home is my office, just as it is the classrooms and study halls of Stone Castle Academy, our private homeschool. What about Mother in comparison? I heard her lament several times throughout the 60 minutes that we spent in mediation over the phone that she works full-time at a medical office, and so the children have to spend most days with her mother down the street. And she thinks that's a good reason to re-enroll the children in public school, because she needs a babysitter. So I will freely offer to her the same deal that I took for years, and she may pick them up at the police department in Sebastopol for 1 weekend a month, being defined as beginning Friday at 5 p.m. and ending Sunday at 5 p.m. when I will gladly take them off her hands at the Dublin Police Department. Now, without any effort, we have stumbled upon yet another criterion for determining what is in the best interest of the children, and that is each parent's motive for seeking custody. I have stated mine, and it should be evident. I seek to gain nothing but the children's own health and happiness, which increases my own. What could mother's motive be in comparison? In point of fact, her dubious motives for opposing the changes that I proposed to the visitation schedule were never uncovered by Heather Grammatico, PhD, during mediation. But I have spent more time than an hour over the phone with Janae, and I am well enough acquainted with her inner workings to tell you what she is hiding. Her first objection is that she would no longer be able to claim both children as dependents on her tax return, so that's a couple $1,000s every year that she's not willing to give up. Her second objection is that she will no longer be in a position of leverage over me in the area of child support, and that's a good source of narcissistic supply for her. Finally, she wants to re-enroll the children in public school because they are heedlessly beginning to group the students up in brick-and-mortar buildings again, and as mentioned above, she needs a babysitter. So, in her mind, it's worth the risk that they could get infected due to an increased exposure of the public school student body demographic and traditional education socialization. I say it is not so. I say that I'd put my life first to keep them safe, and they can return to the very real life and death dangers of the publicly administered institution of traditional education upon my corpse. The recommendation, which is the subject of today's hearing, is entirely predicated upon the erroneous assumption that it is in the best interest of my children to be placed in harm's way and to be put at untold risk by unenrolling them from Stonecastle Academy, our private homeschool, and re-enrolling them in the publicly administered institution of traditional education, as it is classified by the mediator, and therefore the court must disregard this recommendation in favor of further mediation. What about the ability and willingness of each parent to provide stability? I petitioned the court to reevaluate the current visitation orders in light of the fact that the world has changed in untold ways since these orders were drafted so many years ago. In my request for order, I included a proposal for the changes that I wish to be made, saying that the children may now have equal time with each parent, and that they may do so without any increase to the amount of time spent in transportation, and it would be a welcomed relief for both the children and myself. The recommendation before the court today, however, proposes not only that my children should spend 3 times as much time as is necessary in transportation, which is a risk-filled 6 to 8 hour trip for the kids in the car, through Bay Area freeways in Oakland and Berkeley, and costs more than $100 in fuel each trip without accounting for toll or for wear and tear on my vehicle, diverting resources otherwise used for their welfare, but also leaves them spending the majority of calendar days in their mother's boyfriend's residence while they are asked to keep a backpack of their essential things ready for round after round of weekend trips between homes. So I say that this recommendation provides considerably less stability for my children and should therefore be disregarded in favor of further mediation. Finally, in order to determine what is in the best interest of the children, the court is asked to consider whether there has been a history of domestic violence in the home. Which brings us to the last item that I would like to reference in the rationale from 2018, and that is item number 18. And it says, Father states that mother was abusive to him. Father provides copies of text messages between the two parties. She's emotionally abusive out of habit, and has been physically abusive to me personally in the past, which is documented by the court. She is a ruthless, dishonest, vengeful manipulator without remorse. Aside from the fact that I showed up on day 1 in this courtroom 5 years ago with a domestic violence victim's advocate by my side, and the court's own records of her past abuses, as well as her known history of contemptuously disobeying and obstructing the visitation orders demanded by the court unless it suits her, I really don't know what else it takes to convince the Family Law Division in Merced County, Superior Court of California, of her unfailing abusiveness towards others and primarily towards me and my children. The recommendation that is the subject of today's hearing increases that abuse. This recommendation takes me and my family toward harm and only serves to increase and prolong the abuses that we've all already suffered enough of. And so it is for these reasons that I would like to request that the court disregard the current recommendation and instead grant that the next mediation for this case be added to the calendar expediently, and that it shall take place with Catherine J. Wakefield as mediator and none other. Thank you.